Next scheduled news at 11 o'clock over WOR Radio 710, the Talk of New York.
Hey, speaking of madness, speaking of really big-time madness, I'd like to salute, a little madness tonight, if I may. That's, I think is a product of the human mind that is not given as much credit as it should. I mean, sanity can be so unbelievably dull. I mean, a guy goes to work every day and comes home, and he has this nice little black suit, and he wears this little dark blue tie, and he has this white shirt. Does anybody wear white shirts anymore outside of reverends with 3 names? I don't even own a white shirt. And I don't know what that shows, but I don't have any. In fact, I never was much of a white shirt man. But the facts of the matter are, though, that sanity can be unbelievably dull. Just fantastically dull. And of course, also madness. You have no idea what true madness can be like either. You want to hear what true madness sounds like? All right, give me my little quiet madness music there. That's right, that's exactly what I wanted. Listen to this. This is a kind of madness itself. Rudy Valley singing out of the mists of time.
Outside the rain was pouring down.
We'd like to salute tonight's major adventure in madness. It's from Atlanta, Georgia. I mean, you think of Georgia as rather, kind of a conventional place, but madness can spring out anywhere. Oh, yeah. There's no respecter of persons or places. 4 garbage trucks hauled away gigantic piles of garbage. 4 trucks. Get this, 4 trucks. You know how much a garbage truck will hold? One of these big city trucks? 4 garbage trucks hauled piles of garbage from inside the apartment of Willie J. Hill of Friday of Atlanta, Georgia. Willie says he saved all the garbage since last summer, and he's suing the city to get it back. He said, "Oh, that's my garbage and I want it." The garbage trucks, all 4 of them, came in response to loud complaints that were growing almost momentarily by Hill's neighbors, who reported the situation. Willie, 64, had been collecting actively garbage since he moved into the house with his sister last July. He told everybody, and we quote, "I'm going to make money with it." Although he didn't say how. His sister didn't buy it either. Listen to what his sister said. She said, "I'll tell you this. I had to move out of here November 1st because he had that 3-room house packed with garbage, wall to wall, and all the way to the ceiling." Not only that, rats were crawling around in and out and up and down, and it wasn't fit for a dog to live in, and I'm not even a dog.
Rosa Wright, who lives in the duplex apartment next door, said, and we're quoting her,
Oh, I'll tell you, it was stinking so bad I couldn't sleep at night. Lord, I declare, he must have lost his smeller.
Mrs. Wright says that he'll, quote,
He brought home garbage, anything, everything, old bottles, cans, papers. He brought home old rotten fish heads from the fish market and stored them in the kitchen.
Lost his key.
Oh.
Outside, he shouted, Who are you?
And outside the house, way outside, Mrs. Wright said,
I can't figure it out. Willie is very neat. He used to keep the yard spotless. He'd sweep it with a broom, even the grass. And now he's done this.
Well, see, madness is never noticed. Madness is never noticed when it's conventional madness. The idea that he was out there sweeping the grass with a broom should have told them something about Willie. People thought that was being neat, like hell. But, you know, that kind of madness. Now, you see, I think why that story is fascinating is because true madness, opposed from, say, some kind of an aberrative sickness, true madness is merely an extension, over-exaggerated extension. In fact, extension to the point of madness of something that lies within each one of us. Now, you know, there's let's face it, probably the most common thing you've ever heard in your life is somebody saying, no, I don't think I'm going to throw it out. You never can tell. Right? I'm sure that guys have got shirts that they wore in 1948 listening to me right now. Well, you never know, you know? Well, it's got nice buttons. And there's that shirt still hanging in the closet there, down in the bottom of a drawer. Now, that's not madness when you do that. That's just human. But what would happen, say, if one night you came home, you sat down, and you opened a can of beer, and, you know, you just, let's take any kind of beer. You open a can of Schaefer, right? So you open a can of beer, say, you know, and you sat there and you poured the glass of beer out, and, you sipped the beer a little bit. It tastes pretty good coming home from work. You drank the beer, slowly savoring it all by yourself in the kitchen. And then you leaned back in your chair. And, you know, it's a kind of nice feeling. You know. Work is over, you've had a glass of beer. And there, sitting on the table, is that Schaefer can. And something inside of your head says, save the Schaefer can. Save the Schaefer can. Don't let them throw it out. Keep it. You may need that one day. My God, you don't know what you're going to need. The world is coming apart. You better save that can. And so you casually pick up the Schaefer can, and you proceed across the kitchen floor with it and into your room. And you very carefully, because you're a little ashamed of it, you see, in the beginning, you carefully take the Schaefer can and you hide it under your sack, under the bed there, see? Take it back, you don't want to have an empty beer can around. And then a voice says, hey, what about the pop-top? Don't lose the pop-top, you may need that. Oh my God, where did you put it? So you run out. And in the meantime, somebody has thrown out the pop-top. And you know that madness is setting in when you say to them, where's my pop-top? And this lady who's cleaning up the place says, well, I just threw it out in the garbage. What do you mean? You threw that's my pop-top. That ain't yours. I'm going to find it. And then you tear the bag open, you look through the cigar butts and the coffee grounds, and you finally find your precious pop-top, and you take it back, and you wash it off, and you put it under the bed there with the can. And then the next day you come home from work, and curiously enough, you've got 3 Baby Ruth candy bar wrappers that you found on the street. That you know, the same voice. Hey, there's a Baby Ruth candy bar wrapper. Maybe they're going to have a contest one day. You may need that. And you send in 15 Baby Ruth candy bars, and you win yourself a trip to Jamaica. Pick it up. And then you pick that up. And, well, in that way, then begins the very beginning of madness.
Now, it's an extension of a human thing, because there is nothing wrong with what we call the jackdaw syndrome. You know what a jackdaw is? Have you ever heard of the jackdaw syndrome? Well, you stick around. You were going to hear about it tonight, buddy. No more live commercials until I decide to do them. Okay, all right, hold it. That's all right. Don't look confused. I meant what I said. But, you want to hear about the jackdaw syndrome? Listen, I want to tell you, the first time I discovered that, I don't know whether you've ever had this thing bite you. Now, a lot of people live in their background is antiseptic. They live they grow up in a house where everything is nicely brushed and dusted, and there's always somebody yelling, "Take off your rubbers before you come in the house. Don't track up the living room." How many times have you heard this? But then there are other houses where that never enters anybody's mind, where in fact it is considered good form to track up the living room, because it doesn't matter in their living room. Tracking it up. And I want to tell you, when I was about 10, something like that, when I first discovered the jackdaw syndrome at work. And this is a kid's story, so you can turn your radio on again, call all your friends. Shepard's telling a kid's story. And by the way, for those of you who think that kid stories made me what I am today, you're crazy. Not at all. They've held me back from what I should have been. But nevertheless, I was about 10. In fact, I'll tell you, I know I was 10. I know exactly how I know this. It doesn't matter, but I was 10. And I was in, I was in 10. How old, when you're 10, what grade are you in? You're in about 4th or 5th, something like that. Yeah, it was about 4th or 5th. Now, when you're in about 4th or 5th grade, of course, you're getting to be rather mobile compared to when you're in 3rd or 2nd grade. The 3rd or 2nd grade, you're just out of the stage where they keep you in a little wooden pen at home, with those little wooden beads that you play with and all that stuff. Gee, I haven't played with any wooden beads in years. I kind of like to try that again. But nevertheless, I wonder, now how far can you actually remember? This is just a question, nothing to do with nostalgia. It's investigating the human mind. Can you actually remember being a baby? Any of you? You can't? But now it takes work to remember. Now if you say, no, out of hand, you're saying it because I don't think you're actually working on a memory. It takes actual physical, almost a physical effort to recall something, and there is a theory that all those memories are there in your mind. The trick is to bring them out. They're there. Now, I can actually remember, of course, in my field, being a writer and a performer, memory is constantly being used. And I don't mean to remember, quote, the good old days. Any actor, by the way, uses a thing called sense memory, which means that he spends a lot of his time. Paul Newman, when he's preparing for a role, uses a lot of time digging up memories that parallel incidents that he's, in his own life, that he's going to do and use in the film. Motivations and things. And so, you may have no call to do this in your own life. Never do. But an actor, a performer, and a writer always does. Whether he's working in nostalgia or not. Because this is what a good actor draws from. If you're not convinced, I would suggest you consult Stanislavski. He'll tell you a little bit about it. So anyway, as a lifelong performer, I have been a Stanislavski performer all my life, drawing on memory and involving. You saw me the other night play a drum major. I was suddenly a drum major on stage, more than any drum major you've seen in the Thanksgiving Day parade in years, and it came out of sense memory. And I'll tell you how the preparation was done sometime if you're interested. But nevertheless, I can remember, seriously. I can actually seriously remember, and I know that this is an actual fact because of an incident that occurred with my mother about 2 years ago. My mother, who was, she's around and doing her thing. And people keep writing me saying, your mother must have been. She would hate like hell to be put in the past tense like that. If you knew her, she's definitely not in the past tense. But anyway, she for some reason or other, a thing came back to me one time when I went home to visit. And this was only a couple of years ago. And all of a sudden I was sitting around having dinner with a lot of people, and particularly my mother was there. I said, hey, Mom, I said, do you remember the time when I had this egg, and I was watching you, it was a soft-boiled egg, and I was watching you open a soft-boiled egg, and I said to you, in effect, I said, why do you take the bricks off the eggs? The kid would think of it in that way. This is an actual quote. And she stopped there. She says, oh, come on, you can't remember that. It's incredible. I said, yes, I remember that. I remember sitting there. I said, I can even remember I was sitting in a yellow high chair. She says, oh, come on, you don't remember that high chair. She says, we just borrowed that. That wasn't even the high chair that we had borrowed, that high chair. And it didn't belong to us, and it was a yellow one. You actually remember that? I said, yeah. She's like, I was about 2, right. Now you can remember things that are in your mind. It's not just me, it's you. You have them too. Now, I have worked and trained my memory much as the same way an athlete works and trains his body. You don't think Jimmy Connors just goes out there and starts swatting balls around, do you? You do think that. Well, the next time you try it, you better have a direct line to Bellevue, because they'd love to see you. In fact, they probably will see you there in the emergency ward. But preparation is important in that field. So I can actually remember that. I can remember another thing too. Many little brief, almost photographic images out of the time when I was, say, maybe a year and a half, 2 years old, and I can prove that I remember them. Yeah. Well, anyway, that's not the point. The point is that I was about 10 at this point when this happened. And it gave me a real serious appreciation of the whole world of the jackdaw. Now, my mother's a very neat person. I lived in a very neat house, just like everybody else. We had ours had a lawn around it, and it's a fairly large lawn. Had a garage in the back with a driveway that went up between the houses. Very neat. It was painted as sort of a dark yellow color with white trim. It was a very nice house, just like a lot of the houses. All the houses around there were like that. It was suburbs, and there were iris beds. My mother was an iris type, and she had out by the back porch, she had her tulips and all that stuff. So everything was going along fine. I was about 10, and as you get older, different kids come to your class, that you didn't go to kindergarten with, because it was a bigger school, see. So I'm sitting in this class one day, and I got to know this kid. Now, why I got to know, I don't know. He just attracted a kid. We got along fine, and 4 or 5 of us were hanging around together. And so one day, I will not use his name. I will not use his name because I will protect the obvious guilty. So one day we're going home from school, and he lived halfway to school, and I lived all the way at the other end. See, so half of the time when we were coming home from school, I'd be walking with him, and then he would peel off and go home, and I would continue, see, with the other guys. So I'm walking along, and one day he says, "Hey," he said, "how about coming to my place?" And I said, "Sure, okay." He says, "You don't have to go anywhere." I says, "No." So our kids go to another kid's house. Well, I went to this house. I'd never been to this house. It was about 8 or 9 streets over from where I lived, and in a totally different neighborhood. And I remember it was sort of a whitish gray house. Now, the house itself on the outside looked fairly conventional. But we went up the back porch, and the instant I got up on the back porch, I couldn't believe what the scene was on the back porch. The whole back porch, which was screened in, you couldn't really see it from the alley or anything. It's just a big screen, it looked like. But when you got into the back porch, the whole porch was filled with all kinds of stuff. And they were all piled up, all kinds of rusting things like rusted sleds and wagons and wheels, all kinds of wheels. And it was wild. All this stuff is all piled up, and it's rusty. It's big. Like there'd be great big chunks of metal. It looked like they came off the bottom of a car. There'd be stuff covered with oil. It's all puddle. Tremendous. It's like a junkyard. I was fascinated. And so we went right through a passage. This place was so loaded it was like a passage from the door to the kitchen door. So we go into the kitchen door. I was in another world, Dad. I was in another world. I had never been in a place like this to begin with. It had a funny smell. Now you're used to a home smell, right? Most people know what a smell is. You know, it's a combination of cooking and rugs and right guard and all the stuff that people live with. See, well, this did not smell like a home. I was fascinated. It smelled like a place where I had gone to 3 or 4 times in my checkered career up to that point. It smelled exactly like the dump. I'll tell you, it smelled like the dump. You know that smell? Now, the dump has a special smell. It isn't particularly a bad smell, actually. It's a dump smell. Now, here we were, we're in a dump. And I was fascinated. And he said, yeah, come on down the basement. He said, so we go down. The basement was indescribable. Indescribable. I mean, seriously, there were passageways that had been burrowed out of this stuff, which was packed to the ceiling. I don't mean just stuff hanging on the walls. It was packed to the ceiling. It was like you were in a mine. And this stuff, what was the stuff? Well, the stuff was everything. I mean, everything. Well, I could tell you one thing. They had a pile of old, rusted, broken pitchforks. Now, figure that one out. They found some old, rusted pitchforks. There they were. They had about 5,000 old, busted kid wagons all piled up. But that stuff was all in a jumble. It wasn't in any kind of order. No way. I mean, there was no order at all. There were all kinds of tin drums that were piled up that were full of little stuff like nuts and bolts and pieces of spools and all thousands of things. And it was dark, absolutely pitch black in there because the windows were covered. Everything was covered with this stuff, right to the ceiling. And he had a couple of yellow light bulbs. It wasn't this kid. It wasn't Doppler. It was Doppler, in case you're interested. It wasn't Doppler's place. It was his brothers. He had about 5 grown up to me. They were about 18, I suppose. You know, grown-up brothers. And the family lived like that. And Doppler, of course, was a chip off the old block. See, to him, this was just normal life. So we walked through this passage with the yellow light bulbs. They had put light bulbs in there so you could find your way around. So we're going through this thing, and I don't remember why we were in a basement, what we wanted to get. But it was a whole new world. See, fantastic. And I said, where'd you get all this stuff? He said, well, I found it. I says, found it? Gee, I don't find it. And so we go back upstairs, and we go into the kitchen. Now, the kitchen had linoleum all over the floor, and there was a strange smell in it. And the first thing that hit me about the kitchen was the fact that it had nothing like our kitchen had. It didn't have the kind of refrigerator sitting there, anything like that. It looked like it was very temporary. That the people were just about to move out or something. It was just sort of sitting there. See? So in the next room, right to the ceiling, what would have been a dining room packed right to the ceiling with the same kind of stuff. And they had green shades over the window so people couldn't see in, apparently. They knew that this would cause a little talk if anyone knew about it. But the whole place was packed right to the gunnels with junk. Junk, absolute junk. Now, this wasn't good stuff. It was junk. Like they had 40,000 bottle caps. Why? You know, there they were. Or they would have wire. Now you think, well, maybe they were out selling this stuff. Oh no, they were hoarding it. That's different. If you're selling it, it's gone. This stuff was in there. They had this. So Doppler and I loved it. Remember, as a kid, I thought this was great. I mean, this was really the kind of house everybody should have. See, so I couldn't figure out why why didn't we do this great stuff? So I go through this whole house back with Doppler out to the backyard. And I said, gee, that's great, Doppler. He says, yeah, well, he just accepted it as life. I said, where do you get all that stuff? He says, well, we go junking. I said, junking? That began my career in a very esoteric sport that I'm sure few of you have ever actually done actively, and that's junking. It's exciting. And there was something in my head that says, don't tell your mother. Don't tell the old lady. Because I knew somehow it was wrong. So from that day on, for at least 6 months, Doppler and I would meet every Saturday about 10 o'clock in the morning at his house, and we'd each take a wagon, a kid's wagon. He had 100 of them, which he would find, by the way, and fix. He had all kinds of little kid wagon wheels and all stuff. So out we would go. Now what we did was merely just pull our wagon around up and down the streets and in the alleys and put stuff in there, whatever we found. Now, it was not done with the idea of taking it down and selling it. Now, that's the point I'm making here. Don't think, well, a lot of guys go out and no, we just wanted the stuff, which is a totally different proposition. There was never any suggestion of money involved in it. And then I began to discover how exciting it is that there's certain parts of town where you can really find great, fantastic stuff. Like, for example, one day I'm going along down the alleyway there, and me and Doppler found a safe. A safe. It was a safe, a whole safe. See, and it was a little one. It was kind of about 2.5 feet tall, little flat, dumpy safe with these big iron wheels on the bottom. You seen that kind of safe, painted green? It has a gold seal on the front. It says the International Acme Toledo Safe Company. Has a chromium knob on the front. We found a safe. So we struggled for about an hour. Me and Doppler struggled getting this thing in the safe. See? And we're pulling it home. And we're it's great. We got a safe. Now, of course, immediately we began to think, what the heck must be in this thing? It must be fantastic. So we're pulling this thing home. We pulled it about 5 blocks. We were a good way from home. We were about 5 miles from home. We're pulling, struggling. The thing was really weighing the wagon down. See, I'm pushing the wagon, and Doppler's pulling it. We struggle. And all of a sudden, out of a side street, we're going across the street, this squad car pulls up. Guy says, where'd you get that? We found it. He found it. Come on, you kids, don't give us that. Yeah, we found it. Well, where'd you find it? Well, we found it down there by the corner of Arizona Street and 4th Avenue, down in the back of the alley. He said, all right, put it in the car. Come on, let's go. So we helped them load the car. They drove away. It's the last we ever heard of it. Yeah, well, so we found all kinds of great stuff. And where did I put my stuff? Well, as I began to find really great stuff, I began to stick it under the basement stairs. Now, my mother had no idea I was doing this thing. I would go in the basement door with my stuff. Now, we had general stuff in the basement, The old man hung a lot of tires down at the other end, of cars he had once owned. He figured he may get another car that tire size. He had a tire up the back. We had one of these old wooden round tables, the kind that are selling for so much now in antique stores. That old table was down there. It was nothing, thrown out. We had an old refrigerator that was down there that smelled like all old refrigerators. It was down there. We had a workbench. Yelma had a workbench. It was piled with ball jars. He always had a figure. You had a thing that one day he may need a clamp. Never saw him use them, but he had clamps hanging from the wall. So he had all this stuff, see. So I was sticking his stuff in the basement, down under the steps. Well, the stuff was beginning to pile up, you see, but there were also a big pile of papers off to one side, so you couldn't really see it back there. I found a shotgun, a broken shotgun. It was rusty, but it was a shotgun. It was a single-shot, 12-gauge shotgun. Rusty barrel. And the stock was still on it, but the stock was split. Obviously, somebody just threw this old gun out. And it was a great-looking gun. You're not going to pass up a 12-gauge shotgun. So I brought home a 12-gauge shotgun. Do you want to hear some of the other stuff I found? All right. Okay. I one time found a lamp that it was made out of wood. It was a wooden lamp made out of a log, like. It was a birch log. And it had a birch bottom on it. And mounted on the lamp was a stuffed squirrel. There's a squirrel sitting there holding a black walnut in its paws. And it was a real squirrel. Now, you're not going to leave something like that later, are you, if you find it? Of course not. And so I brought my squirrel home. You want to hear some of the other things? Well, innumerable radios. You find radios just like today when you're walking along streets, and you see an old TV set there. I must have found 45 radios, which immediately I took home and instantly took apart. Because, I took all the screws and all the wire out of them and all that stuff. You never know, see. And so then I came down, and Doppler and I used to swap off then, see, since we were both into this junking thing. we would keep it very secret because we didn't want the other kids to know what the great stuff was, because it's just like telling people where the trout are hitting. If you tell people the trout are hitting out there, the next thing you know, forget it, there's 5 million guys. So we kept this to ourselves. We had the certain streets were really great for junking. Well, now, there were other things, for example, that you could find when you're a junker. One of the great things that we found was back of a garage, there was a garage in town that did electrical work. Just ignition work. And so we discovered that they used to throw out condensers. And there'd be piles of old condensers out in the back, which we discovered if you bust them open, there's tinfoil in them. So we were collecting that stuff. Now, I could tell you other things like that. Like, do you know that you're talking to a guy who one time, and I don't know why this stuff was thrown out. I found a brass, beautiful, shiny, it was actually bronze, a bronze faucet with a jade handle. It was dark green stone, a beautiful song. Gee, that's fantastic. So I put that in the thing. That went under the basement steps. I found at least 3 broken axes. I don't know why guys would break their axes, but they throw them out. I'm talking about axes. One time I found a great double-handled saw. You know the kind where you see in the movies where these guys are having this world lumberjack contest, and these 2 guys are going, one is on each side of the saw. I found a saw. It was rusty, but it had 2 handles on it like that. I found a sickle. Fantastic sickle. I also found a scythe. You know the kind old Father Time has? I found that. I found a tennis racket, which was fantastic. And it didn't even have a broken string. A real tennis racket was a Wilson tennis racket with gut in it. Now, don't ask me why it got thrown out. You're looking at a guy who brought home from a junking trip one time an actual foot-operated organ. The guy with the little stops that say Vox Humana on it. Well, now, obviously, I could not hide that under the steps, so I traded that off to Doppler. Now, what I got from Doppler was pretty great. I got from Doppler a Feda radio. Now, I was looking for that type of radio. He had a Feda radio. And so I traded him my great organ, which would make sounds, actually. You could, you run your foot up and down on the thing. So I was a real jackdaw. Well, it all came to a head. Like all stories do, came to a head. One day, I came home from school, and my mother is up, doing her thing in the kitchen. Now, there's certain moments when you walk in, you know there is trouble, right? Well, I walked in, and she turned to me, and she said, "I hope you are not planning to go out anywhere tonight." I swear, Ma. What do you mean? I was going to go out that night. In fact, I was about to go out and play second base. She says, "You're not going out." She says, "You're not going to go out until you finish the job I've got for you." And she was mad. I said, "What? What? What did I do?" She says, "You are going to clean the basement." I said, no. She says, "You're getting rid of all that junk." I said, "It took me 6 months to collect that." She says, "You're cleaning the basement. You're cleaning the basement. That stuff smells. I don't want to have that stuff under the floor like that, where I'm walking around all day long. It's other people's stuff." I tell you what I had done. I brought home 2 used John seats. They were under the floor. Let's do a commercial here for the Village Voice. Terrorist bombs face daily in Israel, and I was behind him. And it's a book published by Grossman Publishers, a division of the Viking Press. E.M. Frimbo, $8.95 at your bookstore now. All aboard with old E.M. Frimbo. Non-stop writing. Bring it up. I want to say one thing about it. That's why I have to say that I feel a certain amount of compassion for old man Hill with those 14 truckloads of garbage in his house. Now, I never collected garbage, but the principle is the same. The principle, let's face it, is identical. For example, what are you going to do with 4 broken lawn sprinklers? Is that or is that not garbage? Especially when you don't sprinkle a lawn. I had no interest in sprinkling lawns. And I had 18,000, maybe 20,000 feet of old lawn pipe and hose. You know, the rubber hose for the sprinkling. Oh, I brought out that. You find that stuff all the time out in the back. I don't know why. Do you know that people throw out the washing machines? Right. Doppler and I spent one weekend, bringing home a Thor washing machine to Doppler's house. Now, apparently it had burned out with a great, fantastic flash because the back of it was all black, where the motor had blown right out, probably electrocuted 17 people in the house. One guy's hand was still in the wringer, but we brought it home. Oh, yeah. Another thing you find, oh, no, I don't want to bother with that. There are probably kids listening. We are all jackdaws. The jackdaw is a bird, in case you're interested, who has an instinct to pick up junk and hide it in his nest. Now you know. WOR, New York, and you stay tuned for In Conversation.